Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Spring Super Spectacular. This is a day long event where we're going to celebrate all things super through the lens of games, comics, graphic novels, film, and media of all sorts. I'm Danielle Costello. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm a research librarian for Louisiana State University. I'm also a member of Games RT, Gaming Roundtable of the American Library Association, and today I'm here for hosting and High Mayhem. This event is being held live. However, if you need to leave or would like to watch it on Twitch video on demand, will be accessible right after we end. If you aren't following us on Games RT, please do so we can show you all kinds of different wonderful ways to bring games and other media into your libraries. For anyone not previously familiar, let me run through all the folks who are going to be helping host today. To start, Games RT is short for Games and Gaming Roundtable, the American Library Association. Our mission is to promote games and gaming in libraries, whether that's programming, collection development, community building, prototyping, playtesting, or research. Joining us are the Film and Media Roundtable, which provides leadership within American Library Association on all issues related to video collections, programs, services, advocacy, and libraries. We understand video includes all formats, analog and digital, multimedia that includes video content, and network delivery of digital or digitized videos. The Graphics Comics Net Roundtable, which unites library workers, educators, comic advocates to promote comics in libraries of all types, because comics are for everyone. Join the conversation at LibComics. And now that I'll explain, let's get on to date with today's program. This is a roundtable discussion where we brought together several librarians from across our roundtables to chat about our favorite media, supers. Today, we're going to explore that space, super and heroic. And to start, we're going to introduce ourselves. So if I could go to Liz, introduce yourself and then pop over to somebody else.
You got it. Hi, I'm Liz Brown. I am the secretary of the Graphic Novels and Comics Roundtable. No, that's wrong. I'm the secretary of the Gaming Roundtable and the treasurer of the Graphic Novels and Comics Roundtable. I am also an outreach and instruction librarian at the University of Colorado, Colorado Springs. My pronouns are she, her, and I'll toss it over to Atina.
Hi, I am Atina Lavanos Probst. I am a member of GNCRT and the incoming chair of the Film and Media Roundtable. I'm also a digital librarian at PBS. Yes, that one. And I am a delightedly huge dork, proud of my own nerdiness, and I have been calling this a major crossover event in my head for the past few weeks. So with that, I'm going to throw it to Adam.
Hi, everybody. My name's Adam. My pronouns are he, him. I am a technology librarian at the Way Public Library in Perrysburg, Ohio. I order our video games here. I order our board games and our Unusual Things collection, and I do adult graphic novels and adult manga, which is a new addition for us to sort of separate these things for the interested parties. I also review comics for NoFlyingNoTights.com. For all of your review needs, any questions you might have about upcoming titles and where things might find the best home in your library, please be sure to check us out. And I'm really excited to be here today. I will pass to Sean.
Hi, I'm Sean Norton. My pronouns are they or he. I am the materials manager for the Carroll County Public Library System in Carroll County, Maryland. I am mostly based in Westminster. I'm new to that position. Before that, I was a manager and collection development librarian in Jacksonville, Florida, specializing in graphic novels and adult fiction. And I also review things for No Flying, No Tights. It is excellent. Can also check out Booklist, has a pretty good site with updates. And my personal favorite of the fan sites is probably Comics Beat. Maybe also Women Write Comics is an excellent resource as well, but they don't do as much reviews. It's more commentary. That is it for me. I guess back to Danielle.
Excellent. Thank you all for introducing yourself, and thank you so much for taking the time to come here and talk nerdy with me today. So everybody knows the format. We're going to do a very casual roundtable discussion on some prompts I've already made, but if chat has any questions or any particular direction they want to move the conversation, or if any of our guests want to move the conversation, we are totally free to do that. So I'm going to start off with a very easy softball question. What is everyone's favorite piece of super media, and why do you love it? And
Right.
yes.
I'm gonna. I will always talk. I'm hard to shut up. We'll just.
I'm worried that if I start on this, I won't stop. Yeah.
This is one of those of I'm answering this as something that is more mainly formative than anything else. The after school addiction to the Batman Superman Adventures, i.e. Batman the Animated Series, that was like young Atina's destination viewing as a child. I have all the love for that series, and I am so happy that so much of it holds up because so many things you love as a kid don't. But yeah, Batman the Animated Series, Batman Superman Adventures, special place in my heart for always.
I think for me, the one that splits both formative and then became my favorite is the Batman Arkham video game series, to play to this crowd a little bit. It hit sort of one of my favorite super characters of all time with one of the best sort of action games I had ever played, especially when the first one came out. And to speak to the last point, the fact that the third game still held up and it didn't really drop off and it was still, pushing boundaries and trying to be fun was great. But the thing I lived for were all of the sort of inside jokes and the Easter eggs you would find throughout, like both literally and figuratively. For me, that one sort of remains one of the high water marks in sort of any mixed media for, the Venn diagram of things I really enjoyed. I'm smack in the middle of that one.
Sean, would you like to go?
It's either me or Liz. Yeah. Liz, do you want to go first or? Nah.
You can go.
All right. I'm going to cheat. I'm going to take 3. My favorite in print is Invincible by Robert Kirkman, and primarily Otley on art. And it definitely aged a bit. There's some stuff, especially early on in the series, where people will use gay as a slur and stuff like that because it was written in 2003. And that is, as someone who was in high school in 2003, that is how a lot of people talked. It's not great, and the updated animated adaptation is doing a very, very excellent job adapting it. But I love it because the book it's wide ranging, and it has all of the continuity and different characters and stuff popping in and out of it that you get from most superhero media. But it's also a contained title. The story has a definite beginning, middle, and end. It has a satisfying conclusion, and it just resonates with me. As far as movies go, honestly, Spider-Verse, easily the best. I love a lot of other ones, but that one is just so good. And then let's see, video game. Honestly, my favorite video game of all time is Marvel vs. Capcom 2, because you can build a tag team that is entirely made of Wolverines. That's it for me.
Thank you, Sean and Liz.
So since Atina went formative, I'll say the X-Men animated series and then that transition to like the next gen. That was precisely my time period, to date myself. And then for getting into superhero comics, I would say Marvel 2012 was when I finally started reading superhero comics. Even though I've read comics all my life, that's when like Ms. Marvel came out. Unbeatable Squirrel Girl was rebooted. And then I think we really entered a really great era for comics, especially in terms of reaching identities and perspectives that have long been missing from superhero comics. So I was really happy to start to see some inclusion there. And yeah, Spider-Verse is the best comic, the best movie, best comic movie, best movie, maybe. Yeah.
Could be up there.
Oh, and Hawkeye with David Asia and I'm getting the name wrong, but the Hawkeye My Life as a Weapon series is also possibly
Matt
thank you. Yeah. I think that is an incredibly influential comic, and I think we can't let it die.
I do love in that launch of the Unbeatable Squirrel Girl, there's still an episode that I reference all the time because it taught me how to count to 31 on one hand because it's like because it teaches you how to do it in binary. And so
Mhm.
you have 5 digits and you can just keep going. But it is the most practical comic I've ever run across. And there, because Squirrel Girl had those footnotes during that run too, there's notes from the artist going like, "Dear God, hands are hard. No, hands are
Mhm.
so hard. Do you know how weird hands are?" Like over several pages as he's showing how to count. It's like, oh, this thing is amazing.
I
It's so
love Squirrel
brilliant.
Girl, and anyone on this panel or anyone watching, if you play Marvel Snap and you run into a player named Scribbles with a Squirrel Girl avatar, that's me. Go easy. I suck.
Look, Squirrel Girl holds up. Of all the
Mhm.
Snap cards, and I'm going to go into Game Land for a moment because this is actually, if we've done formative things that we love, I currently love right now Marvel Snap
It's so
because
much
it
fun.
is so much fun. It incorporates kind of the lore of the cards in very unique and interesting ways. And Squirrel Girl is still an amazing card. Like you get a lot of
Mhm.
starter cards that you're like, I don't care about anymore. But Squirrel Girl holds up as she should because she canonically has
Absolutely.
defeated Thanos, and that is brilliant and wonderful.
She
Yeah.
defeated Galacticus single-handedly after hacking Iron Man. Come on.
She
There we
she
go.
defeats Galactus in the game too, because if you got a creature on every location, you ain't playing them.
Mhm. There we go. So on that kind of idea of superheroes and what makes them unique and interesting, what about the super genre makes it different from other genres that we've talked about? Because we talked about spooky and what makes spooky like last spectacular different and distinct. What do you think makes a superhero comic different from other medias like fantasy or science fiction, even though they're kind of all within a bubble?
I think it's because they come in cycles. So there are eras in comics, and they tend to recycle and retell stories from different perspectives, from different writers, different artists, and it kind of builds on each other. So I'm not the kind of comics fan who gets mad that I'm going to see Spider Man's origin story for the 80 billionth time if you're going to do something new with it and build on it. And I think that superhero comics especially, but all comics really, that are part of a long running series, they're in conversation with themselves and with their predecessors and laying ground blocks for the future. And it's more like laminated, like a croissant, not like a piece of paper. So there's each story builds on it, and I think that's great. I think it's an approach to myth making. I don't like the whole like superheroes or the modern mythology take because yeah, but also not really because they're still corporate owned and all this other stuff. But they do have a lot of aspects of that in how they're created and passing through different creators and having different takes on things.
I think if you look at just how far back we've been reading comics, like go all the way back to Action Comics and look at some of the very first appearances of Superman, Batman, some of these, we're talking inherently about people trying to find humanity in otherworldly characters or figures. Superman, I think, being the first sort of prototypical example, he's actually an alien. But the thing that makes him identifiable, the thing that makes them readable, is the innate humanity he has and how he's striving to do something good. The My Life as a Weapon, um, Matt Fraction run is a good example of Hawkeye, who a lesser super, we'll say generously, not somebody who's got super speed, flight, anything like that, but who spends the bulk of that book trying to do the right thing, trying to do right by his neighbors, trying to do right by the neighborhood, trying to, sort of stay out of trouble, out of the way. I think the thing that brings me back to superheroes constantly is um, people who have, greater abilities than their neighbors, than, their fellow person. Irredeemable by Mark Wade, I think, is an example of a comic where what if they didn't? What if they didn't care? What if they turned? What if Superman wasn't trying to be, better? What if he wasn't trying to be, virtuous, for whatever that means? How
I
much
love
trouble
evil
would we all be
Superman
in?
stories. Yeah.
because it really makes you stop and examine the ones that we see more regularly. What is the sort of aspirational aspect of having all that power, all that ability, and still trying to do the right thing for everybody, regardless of whether you're being thanked or whether you're getting credit for having done the right thing, whether you can save everybody. Where do the stakes lie? I think that's the core of good writing in any comic, is who are they as a person on the inside, and what is it they're trying to do that is correct, that we could identify with as regular people without powers, without
Yeah.
superness ourselves.
And to build off of that, I think acknowledging that we have multiple personalities and personas, and sort of digging into, like, who is our good self, who is our bad self, who is our public self, who is our internal self. That's definitely something that continues to be played out in superheroes, and I think it's very relatable because it acknowledges that we contain multitudes, and there are aspects of ourselves that we want to keep secret, but we may not be able to, and there may be a time and a place for those secrets to come out. And so that's, I think, something that kind of keeps the genre relevant and universal. Because I'll say, like, my favorite DC comic is Superman Red Sun, because I love that total twist on origins, and like acknowledgement of how political and the background for that story is.
Oh yeah. And Mark Miller gets a bad rap as a writer because he does go into some edgelord nonsense frequently. I love it. I love edgelord nonsense. I was a teenage boy in 2003. It's fine. But he gets Superman. And same with a lot of the other like edgier writers like Garth Ennis. He hates superheroes. He wrote The Boys because he hates superheroes, but he likes Superman. And whenever he writes Superman, it comes through as like very honest and very true. And I think that's probably my favorite part of that character. And you brought up Red Sun, and it reminded me of that. Sorry.
I think it's when, especially like listening to all of y'all go through this, a big part of what I think makes the superhero genre its own thing. And I read a lot of fantasy, I read a lot of sci-fi. I love those things. But superheroes, like, it's both and something completely different than either one of those. And I think it's some of these things we've talked about. It's the cyclical nature, it's those big everlasting topics. I actually do really love the mythology of like a modern mythos. Look, I'm named after a Greek goddess. I have to love it. But I love seeing those threads of like, how do we as humans, these things that we still haven't figured out, we're no longer trying to explain how seasons work, we're trying to explain how feelings work. And that's what you end up with in a lot of these superhero stories. Like I have soapboxed for I think all of my friends now, poor suckers, about how the Joker is another iterance in a long string of like chaos gods and gods of mischief. Because like the Joker isn't necessarily trying to like kill people; he's just trying to be a little kooky. And if that means that he's just trying to mess with Batman, sometimes that means he mass murders, sometimes it doesn't. And just like as a string of like chaos deities throughout like world mythology, and just finding those little things I find incredibly fascinating. But now we're not, yeah, it's modern mythology, but not trying to explain the science, but going, how do we human and why do we human? How does that work? Because feelings are weird and big and complicated, and using a story of someone who, like Superman, is a complete outsider trying to human. How do we do that inner outer self when there's a really good reason to keep things secret? Like those are all how do you human questions, and I think that's something that superhero comics digs into because they can be over the top and show people at their best or at their worst, or in some cases at their middling, which is a really fascinating bit. Like we all love that My Life as a Weapon run, and it's a good person at their middling, and that's also really fascinating. And Pizza Dog.
Yeah, it's not. I don't dislike the mythology aspect of it. I dislike when people compare it to mythology instead of acknowledging that it's influenced by mythology and it's influenced by stories. Like I love that influence, and you see it in all of them, and some more explicitly than others. I mean, Wonder Woman and most of Jack Kirby's stuff is much more explicitly mythologically based. But I've run into people who are like, "Oh, it's just like being interested in Greek mythology," and I'm like, "No." I mean, I've always the thing I've always liked about it is it comes out of something that feels very American to me. This story, this type of story, and it didn't start with comics. I mean, it before that it was radio shows. You had the pulp heroes, you had Shadow, you had Green Hornet, you had Lone Ranger, a couple others, and then before that you had the Scarlet Pimpernel, and that's a vigilante story. That's a costumed character seeking to right wrongs and do best by their community. So that I like that as a storytelling tradition more than some other ways to look at it. I just and it's informed by lots of things. It's not just American, obviously. Some of the best comics in recent memory were written by non-American people. That's totally fine. And but I love that it grew out of that. I love that I can trace that history.
I'm going to take that segue because that leads into kind of one of the questions I have that is burning in my mind is what through your particular lenses, so comic, Liz, you're going to have to take games for us, and then film and media, visual media, how do you think that's expressed differently between your different medias, and what are the particular strengths you have in your medias to tell super stories? I will swing it
I
back to Adam.
I
Yeah.
was gonna say I can jump on that first. Liz, I'm gonna pick up some of this for you too, because the film major in me wants to step in and say this. I I I'm going to give the most recent and for me personally relevant example. I love Moon Knight as a character from the comics, and I came to that character um, through a run that I believe was from like the late 90s. And it was at the time one of the more violent things I had read because it's a man in service of a vengeful god. But the question is also, is it in his mind or does this all exist?
Are you
So
talking about the Finch run? The
I am
bottom?
talking about the Fincher on the bottom. Yep.
Yes.
So when we talk
Freaking
about
love Moon Knight. Let's do
and
this.
spoiler alert, at the time Khonshu wants him to like mark everybody with the sign of the moon. He literally removes a guy's face, did it before the Joker made it cool. Oof.
But not before John Travolta.
Right. So he didn't swap with Nick Cage. He just tossed it away. So that was my introduction to the character, and the art at the time feels very indicative of all of the art. Musculature that does not exist in any mammal ever, like just enough bumps so that you think, wow, that's a lot of muscles. And it's like, no, this isn't how human anatomy works, let alone anything else we could find. But like there's pockets on everything, and you're like, what is he keeping in there that's not weighing him down? So fast forward to Brian Michael Bendis and Alex Believe do a run on Moon Knight where he is living in
We don't
LA.
talk about the Bendis run.
No, here's the thing though, the art, I stand by the art. And it's where he meets Echo and they have a relationship there. It's where he is sort of projecting Captain America and Wolverine and Spider-Man, and are they really keeping tabs on him or is it all in his head? The character to me has always been fascinating because the conceit is Mark Spector mentally stable? Does this Egyptian god exist? Is it all a construct? And so as you trace that character over the years, especially the art, I love the writers, but watch the art of Moon Knight because it is like you can see time progressing in comics as you see the way he's been treated up to like Jeff Lemire and Greg Smallwood had a run. Warren Ellis and Declan Shelby did a run, and like they came up with the Mr. Knight character. So anybody who want to bring me up to today, if you watch the Marvel show on Disney Plus with Oscar Isaac, the lead up to that show for me, it stacked a lot of my interests, and I was really curious as to what was going to happen. And then for me as a fan individually, the way I came to the character, the run that was important to me, my history, then going back and catching up on some of it, trying to stay relevant. Uh, the heartbreak I felt because the character looked great. The differences in costumes were, specific and detailed and interesting. Um, Ethan Hawke was outstanding as, sort of the antagonist, because he was playing multiple layers of this character. He was a beautiful croissant of different wants and needs, and all of that was fantastic. And then they very blithely dismissed the idea that there could be different facets um, to Mark Spector and like the multiple personalities of and whatever else is happening there. For me, we raced too quickly to unpacking who is Stephen Grant. We got very briefly introduced to Jake Lockley. Don't quote me. Thank you. And Khonshu is just like immediately corporeal. There's a kaiju fight in it I didn't understand. So there's two sides to this coin. I got to see a character on screen that I never thought we would see on screen. There's too much gray area. He raises too many questions. The initial run was too violent, whatever else. And they found a way to soften some of those edges so that they could put it on a platform like Disney Plus, which is not a lot of hard R content. But to make him accessible, to make the story understandable, to bring in a brand new audience, especially with the TV and the movies that we're seeing Marvel produce, and to sidetrack, I think to a lesser extent, some of the Star Wars stuff we're seeing, you have to open it up and you've got to do some resets and you have to try and find a place to bring in new viewers. The Finch run that I was introduced to, I would deem inappropriate for people under the age of 16 because like it cuts pretty quickly to a psychologically damaged man doing terrible things. As you get a little older, I think you can separate that some and compartmentalize for yourself. But watching what Marvel had to do to try and pull all the different parts apart to say we're going to serialize the storytelling, great, we get so much more because we're spreading it over 8, 9, 10 hours. But what did it cost? What did we lose to get there when we have
everything?
Yeah, we've got to come up with some finite aspects like Khonshu is going to be real in this world. We're not going to spend any time second guessing it. We're going to cut right to, some of the people in Mark's life and what their reality is. And so I love that he's there. I love that Daredevil got a show. I love that, some of these characters who aren't necessarily as immediately understandable as like a Batman or a Superman or a Captain America are getting their due because I love them. Like Doctor Strange, you can go so many ways with. And in the very last movie, we're starting to see how weird and wild you can actually make his world. But at some point, they still want people who don't have my years of knowledge and reading and lore already Rolodexed to be able to come in and see this and enjoy it. So I want that to exist. I want people to be able to find these things and enjoy them and then turn around and find the books if they're so inclined. But there will always, for me, be a tinge of disappointment when they don't hit whatever my personal thing was that really helped me dial into that character and made me fall in love.
And I think that's actually, if we talk about the strengths that each of these various genres brings, I think that is the film and TV strength of this. We were kind of talking in the green room beforehand of like how do you jump in? And I think for so many people, how you jump in is through a movie, it's through a TV show. The strength that genre brings to that the medium brings to the superhero genre is it's an amazing place to start. I can go like deep lore on various superheroes. Like, do you want me to preach about Green Lantern? Because all you got to do is give me a thumbs up and I'll go nuts. But there's but there's a whole side element of this of that's a first story. I think we're all librarians here. We've all fumed about the film adaptation of a favorite book. Things have to be cut, and I think we recognize like different genre, different medium, different thing. But I think the strength of those is when you can introduce someone to a thing. And then again, because I mentioned Batman Superman Adventures and the Batman the Animated Series is something I love, when you have something at a more extended serialization, when you're not trying to do it all in one season. Because I think that's one of the things that, like the Moon Knight series, it didn't know if it was going to get around two, and so you have to be really tight when you think you have, a dozen episodes to play with. With Batman the Animated Series, they had time, and that means that we get the backstory of Mr. Freeze that every comic picked up afterwards because they had time to dive in and make Mr. Freeze one of the most sympathetic villains in the entire Rogues Gallery. They have time to introduce Harley because that seemed fun. So they have opportunities to do these things when you have some of that extra space. But I think the huge thing that a multimedia visual presentation brings to comics and to superheroes is an open door. It's a welcome.
And I want to sort of tie into that. First of all, people who complain about the MCU being people who complain about MCU as like people's entry point, just red flag that that's gatekeeping, and that's going to be something that prevents people from becoming fans and being able to create a community of discussion around the media that we in theory should all be willing to enjoy and collaborate on. And I think the fact that comics specifically, but superhero comics especially, tend to be very collaborative. Like we associate them with a specific writer for whatever whatever their tenure on the character is, but they're the work of multiple years, and they build on each other, as we mentioned earlier in the conversation. So yeah, I think that kind of points to the sort of the need to winnow and to make that sort of artistic cuts that both Adam and Atina were referring to. And I do want to tie it in because my gaming background is more analog games and role-playing games and things like that. I think that makes superheroes especially very difficult to do because just getting into the mindset of role-playing for a single character, it is hard, but add on to that, like if you're playing a superhero who also has to maintain a separate identity and that going back and forth, which is something we'll play with later today with Cape and Bureau.
We will. But before that, I think we got a couple, like about 15 more minutes to square away our kind of conversation. So I kind of like to tie it back into libraries. And what do you think this kind of media does for your patrons, and maybe any challenges you have in either collecting it as far as, deciding which run to choose, or challenges, however you want to take that. So, Sean, you want to go into that area?
Yeah. So they're hard to collect because the numbering changes so frequently. Every time there's a company-wide reboot, the numbering changes. So some of what you do with the library, especially on the cataloging end, is you need to make sure that you're including not just the volume number, but a series number, if possible. And then in some of your notes fields, you need to say what years or what issues it's collecting from the original stuff. That helps your customers find the right order, your patrons, whatever your place calls them, the public. And I think that's probably the biggest accessibility issue, is just making sure that you have them in a well understood reading order. As far as ordering and collection development, I don't know how it is everywhere, but in my experience as a collection development librarian and a comics librarian, they tend to be considered more visual material than they do than they're considered books. So people tend to be more doubtful or questioning about things that are visual, because it's one thing to read a paragraph of two characters having sex. It's another thing to graphically see that. I think we should have both in the library. I think it has a place, but I know that can be a challenge when you're picking stuff. And for film and TV, it can be a challenge just because so much of it's streaming first. You don't have it on physical media to collect.
Tina, would you like to talk about that part? Because I have no idea how you can do the visual part or
All
the
right. So
digital.
I'm definitely speaking for others within FMRT. I work at I'm a librarian at a distributor. My world is different. Caveat. In general, there is so much difficulty in maintaining a collection of streaming first media. We know this. Netflix doesn't sell DVDs of their stuff, which means libraries can't collect them. So, I that first season of Jessica Jones is like can't collect it. Can't collect it. Can't study it then because you can't get like class streaming
Umbrella
rights. You can't get
Academy.
library.
Even
Umbrella
even
Academy,
getting out
so
of the
good.
majors.
Can't collect it. And I think there's just a very physical barrier because so many institutions that are making awesome things aren't considering the library as one of their distro outlets for audience growth. And yeah, they want to make money. They make beautiful things. Of course, they want to earn money off of them. I can't fault that logic, but I think there's still a lot of work to be done in public and university advocacy to your Netflix, to your Disneys, to your Primes, to just be like, hey, we can't study your stuff in a film studies class because we can't legally stream it with our kids, and nobody wants to say, oh, by the way, part of your college fees this year are going to be $50 towards various streaming services. Like that will not go over well. And so there's a huge barrier to the academic study of these things, which is a real shame because that also hinders your ability to really get into the legitimacy of things. I think there's this whole thing with academia of, well, now we can study it. It's legitimate art. It's no longer pop culture. Now it's an art because we can study it in our ivory towers. But we can't right now.
Yeah.
And it's incredibly problematic. And I wish there were handy solutions. And I think the handy solution that we all have the power to do is to just nag Netflix and Disney as much as we want, to at the very least sell DVDs of this stuff so that people can study it.
100%. I'm with you 100%. And thank you for bringing up the archival aspect of this because I think sometimes we forget our archive librarians in their work in all this. They get to be nerdy too, my friends. We do have one question from chat. So, real quick, has anyone on the panel used AR, VR, or any sort of tech for teaching comics?
I would recommend I know it exists in the Oculus system. There is a Batman VR game where you get to solve a crime. It sort of gets to put you in cowl mode. You zip around the Bat Cave. You are given access to a couple of different sort of bat skills, as it were, and it's pretty interesting. And we were early adopters of VR at my library, and we learned the limits of the physical technology, like how long you could use a headset before you're trying to find parts that they don't want to sell you individually to replace and repair your items. So caution there. Wireless now being an option, I think, is going to make it a lot easier than when we were doing it several years ago. But that one's really fun because, to go back to my first love of the Batman Arkham games, you get a lot of the things that were great in there, like fully immersively. In terms of trying to like teach about comics to either create your own or whatever else, I haven't found a lot out there that's great three-dimensionally or AR. There's really fun tools where like you can create your own panels, you can learn to start drawing for yourself, or overlaying, speech bubbles on top of like text images, and sort of learning how to like coordinate your own page. But if you're trying to jump into one that exists now that would give you that comic experience, the Batman VR is fun because it hits all of the highlights without asking you to pretend to climb Mount Everest. You're not just doing this repeatedly for 20 minutes where then you're oddly uncomfortable when it's done.
In my past life as a programming librarian, I didn't have VR. I was pretty much just in the makerspace at our downtown location. But I did have a ton of comics-based programs for all ages that were very successful. And I'm not going to like go my whole lesson plan because we don't have time, but basically take a piece of comics, not necessarily, superheroes, but like an element of making them. Like I used sound effects and you can build that out. So we all have this background here of sound effects. And I would teach kids that, that's an onomatopoeia. And I would make a variety of sounds using different things in the room, and I would have them create their own sound effect bubbles like this one for the sounds they hear. And that's a way to take the elements of comics and teach them. So even if you don't have access to a VR headset, you can totally do this. It doesn't have to just be a drawing program.
And there is another question about, are there email addresses available for all of us? Yes, we will have all that information. If it's not already there, we'll pop it in afterwards into the resource doc, which has just been popped into the chat as well. So check that resource document out. We all collaboratively work together to put our favorite, most wonderful things in there, as well as some good resources for teaching and like more education in this particular area. So we'll make sure that everybody who's in the various conversations, emails, and Twitter handles, all that are available for y'all. I think we have about 4 minutes, so I kind of want to go into why everyone thinks that superheroes and superhero media, comics, films, games are wonderful for libraries, and we can end it that way. And Liz, if you'd like to go?
Yeah, I'll say it's because they have such cross-disciplinary or cross-media interest. You can absolutely drag in a reluctant reader because they like the MCU, and you can find a lot of entry points for people who are fans of one aspect or one version of superheroes, and then use it to tie them into other interests, whether that's taking them from comics into games, from film into comics, from comics into literature with a capital L. There's always that cross-disciplinary platform. Go ahead, Adam. You're laughing. You have to say something now.
I love that idea, the literature with the capital L. I tell everybody, because I've long been a champion of the idea of visual literacy, that like you got a reluctant learner or a reluctant reader rather, you got somebody who's English as a second language, you've got somebody who's maybe not reading at the grade level that we're trying to get them to, whatever else. Sean made a great point, like the onomatopoeia, pow, zap, bam, like the idea that somebody throws a punch, you're not watching it connect, it didn't happen in real time, but that visual image tells you something, and our brains will interpose everything that's happening. It's like a flip book, like we will make the magic happen in between those moments and those panels. And there's a comic, graphic novel, whatever, for everybody. I firmly believe that. You want something more like fantasy and you don't like superheroes, great. Read Mouse Guard. It's one of the most beautifully written and illustrated books.
It is a very pretty book, yeah.
And like, you like The Witcher, but you don't like the setting, great. Witcher Ronin. It's the idea of Geralt in like, feudal Japan. It absolutely transfers one-to-one in the setting. Biographies available now. There's so many great illustrated biographies for musicians, famous, politicians, whoever. I just bought one for our library about Evita Peron, and it's like a beautifully illustrated black and white, book. We're getting them internationally now. European comics making their way here and having better accessibility thrills me because there's a different sensibility to it. So there's something for everybody. Every reader in your library, there's a graphic novel or comic that they will love. It's about asking those sort of leading questions to find out what they want to be reading and putting the right book in front of them. But it's every age group in your library. There's something for them in there.
Public libraries should collect superhero media because their public wants it. Other libraries like archives and academic libraries should collect them because people are making them. And when people make stories, they tell you about themselves and their history, whether they mean to or not. It's important.
Tina, you want to close us out?
That was just a beautiful end line from Sean. No, I think what it really comes down to is like collect things because they'll connect with everybody. Like Liz talked about across reading levels, how it all connects, and across ages because Superman's been around forever. Like grandpa and the child can all bond over Superman. There's and it's the same story and it's the same love. And because the people are passionate about it, if we're serving our public, then we give our public things that they're interested in. And we collect them, and God, I love a good story, so let's do it.
Thank you so much. And God, I love a good roundtable. This has been excellent. Thank you all so much for coming. Thank you, audience, for your chat, for your chatter. We're going to take a 15-minute break, but come on back. We're going to do a live dramatic reading of a wonderful it's Quince? Yeah.
Quince.
Quince. There we go.
Quince.
Yay. All right. We'll see you in 15. Bye, everyone.